Hi Claire, hi Anne.
Hi Andy.
Hi Andy.
Thanks very much for agreeing to this interview. Really appreciate the fact that I've got both co-chairs. That's brilliant. Can I ask you to start by introducing yourselves, please?
So I am Clare Kingaby-Lewis, one of the co-chairs for Suffolk Parent Carer Network, a role that I have held for just over a year, having been one of the parent representatives for the organisation for some time.
And I'm Anne Humphreys. I'm the other co-chair of Suffolk Parent Carer Network and have been in post since summer of 2016.
Brilliant. Loads of experience. So my first question is this, and I'm hoping both of you can answer at least the first bit, which is how have you been looking after yourselves and your fellow volunteers?
So I think communication for us has been really key. I think at one point myself, Anne and the team were talking daily. So we've been having lots of phone calls just to ensure that we're checking in with everyone, lots of virtual meetings with the SPCN team, because actually something that's changed drastically for us, like it has everyone else, is the fact that we aren't sitting down together, which is something we did quite frequently before. So in terms of checking in, it's been very much about, ensuring that everyone's well-being is good and okay, and just seeing where everyone is at, because we have been so exceptionally busy that we've needed really to ensure that we're all keeping on top of things and keeping in touch with each other.
I think in terms of looking after myself, some people who know me will know that I'm not very good at doing that. I'm not very good at switching off or taking time off. So it's something I've had to be really mindful of during the pandemic, because particularly in the beginning, I think probably as a team, we were pulling 70, 80-hour weeks and doing 7 days a week. And so I had to consciously stop myself going down a rabbit hole of stepping into my office, particularly at weekends, because I would go in to maybe just answer one email and emerge a couple of hours later because various things had come up that were really important. So now at weekends, I shut my office door on a Friday and I don't go back in until a Monday morning. But also having family time together. So as a family, we eat together every night and we spend the evening together. And I think that for all of us in this household has helped to keep us well.
I'm glad to hear you've started looking after yourselves. And by the way, how much do you both get paid?
We're volunteers. So
a nice healthy salary of zero, but yeah, we do it for the love.
It's important to note that. Thank you. My next question is this: so what Suffolk Parent Carer Network, what is it, and how does it support families?
So we're a group of parents and carers of children with additional needs and disabilities. So we've all got that lived experience. We've all travelled the journeys that our membership has. It's for us to ensure that the lived experience of those parents, carers is shared with our system partners. So that's health, education, social care, local authority. So it's across the board in terms of our partnership. And what we want to ensure that actually happens is that we co-produce the services that might be new, that might be coming up and through the system, but also we share what's working well for families, but we also, challenge and share the feedback when things aren't working so well and that improvements can be made. So we cover a range of 0 to 25 in terms of our remit. We're actually a statutory provision, so we're written into the SEND Code of Practice. You'll pretty much find a parent carer forum across each area nationally, but they all work very, very differently. We're very lucky here in Suffolk. We have a very close working relationship with our partners, and co-production is fundamental to that. So, we will share good practice, but we will also challenge where we think, improvements absolutely have to be made. So for us, as we've already said, we're volunteers, but we've got that lived experience and that knowledge to ensure that we've got that voice for our families and our membership. And when I say our families, I mean our membership. We kind of assume that they're ours in a way that sometimes throws people a little bit, because I think we're talking about our own specific families, but actually we're talking about, the bigger picture. We're talking about all of our membership and their families.
Anne, did you want to add anything to that?
So I think, yeah, we strive to increase our membership all of the time, because the more families who belong to SPCN, the stronger our voice is. There are 14,000 children and young people with additional needs and disabilities in Suffolk, and I think we're standing at about representing 2,500 families now.
Wow. And I bet that compares well and favourably with other parent carer networks across the country, I imagine.
It absolutely does. And when I joined SPCN, I think we had 128 families as members. So we've grown exponentially over the last 4 years. But we know that it's still a drop in the ocean compared to the 14,000. So we always want to do better.
Brilliant. Thank you. My next question is this. So how have you adapted your offer to families since the outbreak?
So we adapted our offer really very quickly, because we realised ourselves that actually our families were going into lockdown and they were going to need us more than ever. So we had a lot of very late night conversations, but very much we realised first off that families needed to speak to someone that understood their journey, what they were going through. So we changed our offer to add peer-to-peer support calls, and that's something that we'll probably continue with going forward. And it's been something that's been very popular in terms of, you know, our families getting in touch with us and those parents and carers who need to just talk to someone that understands. They don't want to talk to someone from, you know, health or education more often than not. They just want to be able to share the things that they might not feel comfortable sharing with someone else, with another parent carer who knows what it's like. So that's one of the first things we did. And then we had a late night conversation, as myself and Anne often do, when we thought about, you know, these families are going to be at home, what can we do to try and keep the children and young people busy? And it started with a conversation about, could we send out maybe a sensory toy, something that the children and young people might, you know, keep them busy for a little bit. That very quickly morphed into an entire family support box of sensory items. I think it's fair to say that when we get our heads together, it often becomes something much bigger very quickly. So the sensory support boxes have now reached over 2,000 children and young people. So it's one of our little dragons here, brought him along. So he needs rehoming, bless him. He's been stuck in a box for far too long. But those boxes were really to keep the children and young people, to give them some things to do to keep them stimulated. So little dinosaurs, squishy gel and slime, which probably didn't make us entirely overly popular with some families. Rubik's cubes, all sorts of different things. But we also had colouring books. But they weren't just colouring books for the children and young people. They were for, you know, mums, dads, parents and carers. We also had stress balls. When we went out with our offer, we had a lot of parents, as a bit of a PS on the end of an email saying, could we have a stress ball, please? Would it be okay? Absolutely. You know, no, you can have, you know, whatever you need at that time. So we've had some amazing feedback from those families. Really has been, you know, and from receiving a box in the post, that's the first thing that the children and young people, you know, go completely wild about, because often you don't get things in the post. So it's a box with their name on. It's had a handwritten letter in it from the team just to say, you know, hi, we're thinking of you. Here's some bits for you to play with. We also worked really closely with the psychology and therapeutic team and put some top tips in those boxes just for some strategies that might help. And we went out to our membership and said, you know, what are the things you would say to each other? What would really help you in this situation to say, you're not alone, we've got you, you know, what can we all do together? So, you know, because isolation is a huge part of, you know, what our families experience. So that's been really important to us. So for us, I think it's fair to say that our houses look like a mini version of a toy shop for a significant period of time. And we may well have tested some of the toys that we had just to make sure that they were obviously suitable for use. But I think for us, it's been really heartwarming to know the difference. Just what some people would say, you know, a little box of fiddly things and sensory bits has made to those children and young people. So, and I still can't watch some of the clips that families have sent through to us without getting a bit emotional of their of their little people, you know, opening these boxes, and it's a bit like Christmas, you know, what does this do, what does that do? So those are things that will continue. We won't stop doing those, we'll carry on, but for us it was really about adapting to make sure that we could try and just give a little something to these families to help.
It's so important that you're a trusted source of support, and you're trusted because you've got similar experiences. So, and it's not the system offering something that it thinks is important. You know these things are important, so that's really good. Do you work with any other agencies to support? And there was another thing I wanted to ask. I mean, there are dark sides to being in lockdown when you've got children with special educational needs. Can you give it an idea of what that's like?
So I think for me, it was one of the early conversations I had with a mum that really brought it home, and I shared this experience when we were at the daily tactical management calls with our colleagues, and mum said to me, lockdown isn't new for me. I've been in lockdown for years. This is my life. It's no different. So for me, it was really poignant to understand that actually, whilst, you know, from a national perspective, everyone was feeling like they were going into this new lockdown situation, but actually for lots of our families, they'd been that way for a really long time. And I think it's a stark reminder of how isolated those families are and will continue to be as we reach whatever the new normal is, or recovery, or whatever the current buzzword is. But for us, you know, it's a reminder that actually these families live this way already and will, you know, potentially continue to do so as things change.
And I think as well, I think for some of our families, behaviour that challenges was a real theme during lockdown because of the significant effect that lockdown had on disrupting the routines of children and young people. And I know that a lot of the calls we took were regarding that, and again we worked with the Suffolk County Council Psychology and Therapeutic Services team to put together some top tips. But the reality was that families were often in enclosed spaces and were having to deal with this on their own every day, and it was really hard. And there were some heartbreaking conversations that we had, and that was one of the first themes that we flagged up to statutory services, that actually for families they needed really urgently a route to be able to get some support with this.
Yeah, they're certainly not hard to reach, are they, these families?
There's no such thing as hard to reach. It means that we're not approaching them in the right way.
Exactly. Could you very quickly touch on your work with schools as well, because you've got a footprint across all the schools, or most of the schools in the county?
So we have some really good links with pretty much all of the schools across the county through our ambassador Sharon Hobbs, who up until lockdown has been out and about forging those really strong relationships, and that enables us to get information out to schools. So they were very good promoters of our family support boxes, but actually they were making direct referrals. So one of the first things schools said was, if parents don't feel in a position to be able to sign up as members of Suffolk Parent Carer Network, can we still refer them? And we said absolutely, it's much more important that children and young people get the boxes. Signing up for membership is an aside. So schools were making direct referrals, and it wasn't just special schools, it was pupil referral units, other forms of alternative provision, mainstream schools. And as time went on, even after schools started to go back, we would get emails saying, are you still doing this? Because actually there are some families who can't come back at the minute, and they still need to, we think it would be a benefit to them. So we've continued to do that, and we expect the position to be the same in September, because we already know that there will be some children and young people with health needs who will not be able to return to school, and there will be families who do not feel confident about returning their children and young people to school yet. So yes, we work across schools, we work across the voluntary sector, and I think one of the things that we've seen is what the voluntary sector can do during a pandemic particularly.
That's good to know. Thank you. And you're quite right. It does carry on into September. My last question, and this is about looking into the future. What are the key areas of concern that you have, and what have you learned from COVID to date?
So I think consistency across the board. So to give you an example, we know at the minute the children are going to be going back to school in September. So talking about messages that are going out to families, we'd like to see more consistency across the patch. We'd like to ensure that families actually are hearing, similar messages at the minute, to ensure that actually we're not getting this confusion. And actually that communication is really key, because we know that actually we're getting a lot of calls and a lot of communication from our families who still don't really understand, what's going to be happening in September. What we've found throughout the pandemic is that we've almost been translating some of the information that's come down from the government. So I don't mean into another language. I just mean actually to make it easier for families to understand, because as we all know, the information would come out from government. Then you might speak to your neighbour on the phone or your friend. Things get a little confusing, and then before you know it, people really don't understand what's happening. So for us, a lot of the role has been, ensuring consistency in communication. I think the difficulty for families is the unknown. So, we've got the media haven't helped always with that. So speculation is always really, really difficult. So families have come to us to ask, and we aren't actually in receipt of any more information than them sometimes. So again, I think that's been really challenging in terms of the messages. So it might start the morning with one piece of information, and by the end of the day it's changed. So, for families who are already very vulnerable, that's been really difficult. And I think we need to get better as a system, much better at ensuring that we communicate early where we can, and just to alleviate some of the, the anxiety and the pressure that our families are feeling. So I think that, going forward, I think that needs to improve significantly, because I think we have learnt a lot from the pandemic, and I think we need to keep the good practice that's gone really well. But I certainly think that there are things that we could learn from, going forward, to ensure that we at least try to support our families, much better.
And I think that one of the things that really stood out for me was how adaptive or adaptable the voluntary sector is, and how quickly all of us across Suffolk were able to adapt and change our offers in light of the pandemic. And it's enabled us to begin to bring some work together, where all of the VCS organisations for children and young people are meeting together, and we are trying to put together what our service offers are, but more than that, sharing what the themes that our families are telling us, and what we found is they're not dissimilar, but also then begin to identify how, as organisations, we might be able to meet some of those needs, and then what's left. So what are the gaps and what do we do about it? And I think that's going to end up being a very strong piece of work that we can go to commissioners of services with, to say, well, actually, this is what Suffolk needs to respond to children, young people and families, and this is how we can help, but this is also the help that we need to do it. So I think that was one of the things for me that really stood out. The other thing that stood out was decisions that we'd been trying to support to get made for some considerable time. So I'm thinking of one particular decision that we've been trying for 2 years to get a provider to make, and was done within days when the pandemic started. So what it showed was that we can make decisions quickly in Suffolk, but we can make the right decisions. So we're not making rash decisions, and also that we seem to have had a lot more attendance at meetings from services since we've gone digital, and I think that has enabled a much richer conversation. I think for me, one of the things I'm really concerned about is the return to school, for lots of reasons. I think that we have a significant number of families whose children and young people experience school-based anxiety. where during lockdown they have led a much happier and a much more well life. And certainly some of the conversations families are having with us is, how can we subject our children to returning to that life in school? And where are the conversations happening within education about that very subject? So we have started those conversations, and we've made sure that we have raised that actually from very early on in the pandemic consistently. And I think there are some really difficult conversations to have going forward with Suffolk as a whole about the adaptations that we need to make for some of our children and young people, some reasonable adjustments that need to be made, and some changes that we need to make to the way that we deliver education and the way that we engage our children and young people. And I guess the other thing that really worries me is how much detrimental impact there has been to children and young people with additional needs and disabilities who have lost out on their therapies during the pandemic. And I was speaking to a parent this morning whose child received speech and language therapy, and this mother said to me, I've been at home full time with my child for 6 months, and I'm now reaching the point where I'm beginning to not be able to understand my child at times, and my child's speech and language has regressed to even probably September last year. So not only when speech and language starts again will they need really intensive speech and language, but that's just to get them to where they were before lockdown. So how much more are they going to need to help them to make the progress that they still needed to make? And that family's not alone. And I think we all recognise that health services have really struggled, quite rightly, during the pandemic for those face-to-face appointments. But I think we are going to see the lasting impact of this for a long time. And we as a county have a responsibility to do our utmost to reverse the detriment that's been caused.
Well, I couldn't possibly summarise what you both just said. I mean, it's everything from clear, consistent messages to recognition of the fact that people live with uncertainty, to the fact that the voluntary system is being adaptable and collaborative with the statutory sector as well, which is fantastic. Concerns that that's not going to carry on happening beyond, so we go back to type. That's the scary thing. What's approaching when we go back to school, and you mentioned, and also that there are families or young people who've actually benefited from this time. Not being in an environment at school where they feel stressed and anxious, but that's built up like a pressure cooker at home as well at the same time. So all of this, wow, there's a lot to think about. Thank you very much for your time, both of you.
You're very welcome, Andy.
You're welcome. Thanks, Andy.